Breaking news. Theory Val denounces Iranian government's act of intolerance towards believers in the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. CAP-LC's powerful stand advocates for persecuted Ahmadi religion of peace and light in Iran to address the EU Parliament and highlight the ongoing danger these Iranian citizens are facing. UN Human Rights Statement. In a significant development on the case of the 101 members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light currently detained in Turkey, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has released a statement urging Turkey to halt the deportation of the group. More on that later with our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator, Hadil Khouly. An outpouring of support. Our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator comments on the active support provided by various directors of human rights organizations. Stay tuned to hear how leading human rights directors unite in defense of oppressed members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light worldwide. Global persecution. We investigate the global persecution faced by the Ahmadi religion of peace and light and uncover the truth of our persecution as a religious minority. Medical travesties. Dr. Irfan Al-Ahmadi gives us a report on the medical emergency states that these detained members are suffering from. Oppressed Press. An exclusive interview with one of our journalists who were on the ground during the historical border crossing attempt by the 101 members of the religion. Actively Humane. A special report on one of the directors of the many human rights organizations standing in solidarity with our persecuted people. This is Divine Just State.
Welcome to our show, A Divine Just State. So we have some great news to talk about. Let's get right into it. Thierry Val has been speaking as the director of CAP Freedom of Conscience on behalf of the 101 persecuted members who are currently detained in Turkey. Let's check it out.
The Ahmadi religion of peace and light is deeply concerned for the safety and the life of its members who are denied the most basic human rights to practice their faith freely. Its Iranian members were forced to flee to other countries such as Turkey, where they continue to face persecution, detention and deportation, orders to return to them to Iran, where execution is taking effect. This issue has just been raised just yesterday by the UN Special Rapporteur on Religious Freedom, the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of Migrants, and the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention and the UN Rapporteur of Minority Issues. They urge Turkey to invalidate deportation orders and provide its members with international protection, enabling them to seek asylum and freely practice their faith without fear.
So that was Thierry Val at the EU Parliament speaking about it. That's great news, but that's not where it stops.
Correct. The news went higher, and now the experts of the United Nations have made a statement. Let's check it out.
A historical statement from United Nations human rights experts. Hadil Khouly, our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator, broke the news to us that human rights experts from the United Nations have spoken out against the plight of our detained members in Turkey.
A historical statement came out from the United Nations Human Rights Council's special procedure on the plight of our detained members in Turkey and the persecution our members are facing in Muslim-majority countries. The statement that came out today, signed on by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief, and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minorities, and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights of Migrants, and the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and many other experts, adopted specifically a call on Turkey to annul deportation orders as they are in violation of the principle of non-refoulement.
Non-refoulement, according to the European Commission, is a core principle of international refugee and human rights law that prohibits states from returning individuals to a country where there is a real risk of being subjected to persecution, torture, inhuman or degrading treatment, or any other human rights violation. Members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light have been brutally persecuted, leading to these experts deciding to speak out against their ongoing unjust treatment that is based on religious intolerance.
And it recognized that our members in their home countries have faced persecution, imprisonment, detainment, torture, and even threats of execution because of their faith in the Ahmadi religion of peace and light.
In a significant act of confirmation, these UN human rights experts are recognizing that members of this religion are being targeted and persecuted simply due to their faith in Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq, from him is peace, as the riser from the family of Muhammad, and their belief in the gospel, the goal of the wise. This further proves that these acts of human rights violations are not a scattered coincidental series of unfortunate events, but the result of an intolerance-based perspective from extremist governments.
The statement spoke about the persecution against our members in Algeria who have been imprisoned for 6 months. It spoke about the arrest of 15 of our members in Iran. And it recognizes that this group, the members of this religion, are a persecuted religious minority, and that these deportation orders should be annulled, and that there should be a risk assessment for all of these members.
By confirming that these individuals are indeed persecuted, the UN human rights experts firmly laid out that deporting these members back to their countries would be a breach of law. This statement by UN human rights experts is a great step in the right direction towards bringing justice to these oppressed refugees. Furthermore, the Rule 39 initiative stood by the Ahmadi religion of peace and light at the Italian Coalition for Civil Liberties in order to submit an application for interim measure against the Turkish government with the European Court for Human Rights. The application included an order to the Republic of Turkey to immediately release all the applicants, especially the minors and the vulnerable members, a request to immediately send an independent medical expert within 24 hours and then once every 3 days, as well as a request to immediately send independent human rights organizations for monitoring purposes of conditions at the detention center within 24 hours, and then once every 3 days. Since 2021, CILD is hosting, with the support of 8 international law firms, the Rule 39 initiative for the protection of the human rights of asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants in Europe. And since it began, it has assisted over 300 people and has provided over 3,000 hours of pro bono legal support. The Ahmadi religion of peace and light is grateful for their support.
We're joined now in the studio with our Human Rights Outreach Coordinator, Hadil Al-Khouly. Welcome to the show, Hadil. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Alia. Thank you for having me, you and Arnold.
So, Hadil, there has been a very heartwarming experience that we've had when we see the global support that we're receiving for our persecuted members of this religion. We've seen different human rights organizations standing up for our members. We've seen different media outlets speaking about it. Let's give the viewers a bit of a rundown on these people. Who are these people who are helping us right now?
So obviously, the case is an extreme case of persecution against a group who have done nothing except upholding their belief in the rise of the family of Muhammad, Aba Al-Sadiq, Abdullah Hashem, believing in him that he is the riser, that he is the awaited Mahdi, believing in the seventh covenant, and believing in his book, The Goal of the Wise. And because of this, they had to pay a really hard price, which is having to flee their homes with their children, with their families, not just fleeing persecution. On top of that, they are detained. On top of that, they are risking deportation and being sent back to their home countries. And during all that, they are subjected to violence, beating, children who are neglected for medical care. The case was immediately adopted by international European human rights organizations such as Human Rights Without Frontiers and CAP, Freedom of Conscience, and also specifically the Border Violence Monitoring Network, which even a day before the events on the border, have published a statement addressing the Bulgarian authorities as well as Frontex on the EU borders to allow the group entry. And this was a letter, an open letter that was signed by 28 human rights organizations. So the huge work of the human rights organizations, as well as media, the result of that was that it was now taken on the next level, which was on the levels of intergovernmental organizations, specifically the United Nations and the OSCE and the European Parliament. So after the event at the United Nations, at the Human Rights Council, the session, the 53rd session, and the conference in Vienna at the OSCE, something historical really happened, which was a joint statement that was issued by the United Nations with more than 3 UN special rapporteurs and the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, issuing a statement calling on Turkey to stop the deportation of our members.
That was absolutely incredible. We were so amazed at that point and very, very grateful to everyone who's been involved in it, and also to you, Hadil, for being actively involved in this case from the very beginning till now.
The reason why it happened that way is only because of the rise of the family of Ahmadi Aba Al-Sadiq, because these persecuted people had a leader like him, an imam like him, a father like him, who doesn't sleep at night except to work day and night, involving, when think about it, he involved the 3 biggest international institutions on human rights. He got every single intergovernmental institution to talk about this case, and this is in less than 2 months. Yes. I mean, he had this case being the biggest case on asylum seekers now on the scene. And that was because, first and foremost, he put all the resources that are available to document every single step of the group. And so if you look at this, I mean, these are the results, but if you look at what he has done, so first and foremost, when does it happen that you have a whole satellite channel going and documenting that?
Live streaming it.
It was live streamed, where now anybody can go back and see that moment when this group approached the border to seek asylum. And that was first and foremost a protection for them. But it also was the key in opening a conversation now on what are the legal pathways that exist in the first place for asylum seekers, because obviously now there are none. And we showed that in that case. And I think what he has done in that way is absolutely phenomenal, and is not just for the members of our faith, but he has really opened the door for every oppressed person who has every right to lodge their claim for asylum and to find international protection. So in less than 2 months, we are now at this point where our members have this protection. As I said, I think this is absolutely historical.
It's historical, absolutely. And as always, Hadil, it's always a pleasure talking to you about these things. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. And now we'll go directly to where it happened in Turkey. We have our correspondent there, Hikmet Al-Mahdi, who is interviewing one of our brother, Haidar Al-Mahdi.
I'm joined here right now with our brother Haidar. He will talk to us about the incident happened when they went to the Kapkala border.
Hello, brother Haidar. Can you tell us what you experienced when you went to the border gate?
My dear brother Hikmet, the cameras recorded us there. We went there. When we reached the border gate, the gendarmes there suddenly surrounded us. The people around us tried to manipulate everyone by saying they unfurled the Zionist flag. Then the soldiers verbally abused us. Then we came to the door. There, the director of the Provincial Immigration Administration said to us, "We will help you. We will take you through there." He promised us. But he left, came back after he left, and did not answer us. And all of a sudden, the gendarmes attacked us as seen on the camera. They beat all of us, women and children. Most of them had scars and traces of blood on their hands. We got beat up. Then they detained us. We were detained for 4 to 5 days. In the same way, they tortured, beat and harassed all of our foreign brothers and sisters there for 4 days. They were taking them to the toilet and beating them,
psychologically abusing them. There were children, there were women, there were old people among us. There were people who needed medicine. That's how we were persecuted for 4 to 5 days.
So on what basis did you go there to the border? How did you intend to pass there?
This is the reason why we went to the border. 4 years I believe in the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. Whether from my hometown or Turkey, people exclude me. In fact, according to their holy book, I must die. I have no right to live. What should I do in this situation? Europe already officially recognized our religion. That's why we want to take refuge in Europe.
What are the conditions of Edirne Removal Center? What are the conditions there?
As you see, Hikmet, when it was understood that we were innocent, they left us as 3 Turks. We have not been arrested. When more than 100 of our brothers were there, I saw the conditions there a little bit. I looked through the door. The people there were treated like slaves. The soldiers were shouting at them. I heard it with my own ears. They didn't even want us to look there. So I was very scared. I hope refugees, people who came from abroad and took shelter in Turkey, should not fall into such places. Because the health condition, food, education, it's all terrible. They made an agreement with the European Union in 2015. Turkey receives a fund of approximately 6 billion euros from there.
Why is Turkey trying to keep migrants in their country if they don't want migrants? And then they decide to hold them as hostages and spend money on them.
They only take money. They do nothing but get money. Because the people there, especially children and elderly, are in a very difficult situation. It is not what it seems. What Europe does is, I'll just give you money and you take care of them. Turkey is probably doing this for money. There is no other answer to this. The people there do not see some important details, whether it's about bathrooms or toilets. Nothing is watching what is going on there. The people there are abandoned and homeless, and it's not even clear what will happen to the people there in the hands of the Turkish police and Turkish soldiers.
How is the situation of the women and the children there?
I lived there, in the gendarmerie. My mind is still tormented by the tears of women and children and the fear they suffer. I always think of it at night. I'm traumatized right now. And we can't practice our religion. So what did we do? Officially, we let them see us, because 28 international human rights organizations were waiting for us on Bulgarian lands. When we went there, the Turkish Gendarmerie Board of Forces did not listen to us.
What's your comment on the UN human rights experts making the statement as saying that Turkey should not deport the refugees?
This is what was expected in this action of the United Nations. They shared it on their official page. And this created an extraordinary hope with us. In fact, these people are considered to have almost saved their lives of nearly 100 people. Because if they were sent back to their countries, they would be tried, they would be assassinated, they would be executed. This was expected. It was a good thing for us. It was hopeful.
So that was our brother Hikmet Al-Mahdi. Thank you so much, Hikmet, our Turkish correspondent. We're now going to go to our special correspondent, Runa Al-Mahdi, who's going to be taking a closer look at the medical perspective of the detained members with Dr. Irfan. Let's check it out.
Hi, Alia, we're here now with Dr. Irfan Al-Mahdi to get an update on the medical condition of the 104 members of our faith that have been detained by Turkish authorities in Edirne deportation center since more than 1 month. More than 1 month is an extremely long time for a person with a medical condition, an elderly, or a child. Hi, Dr. Irfan.
Hello.
Can you please give us a breakdown of the medical condition of the 104?
Yes, so based on some of the reports that have come out, including people who've been acutely unwell, they've suddenly fallen very ill, as well as those living with, like you mentioned, chronic health conditions. It's definitely a concern because facilities and that they're offering there at Edirne is definitely not in keeping with what one would expect when you look at the various human rights conventions to do with the provision of healthcare to refugees or asylum seekers. And I think a few cases definitely highlight how alarming the situation is. But in general, when you've got a bunch of, over 100 people that are comprised of men, women, children, elderly, people with chronic health problems, certainly it can't be a good thing. There's two elements to it. One is the physical health element, and we know, for example, that people who are kept in these kind of detention centers with limited space to move, they often develop certain health problems from basic cardiovascular decline, where you are not able to move naturally, have exposure to sunlight, fresh air, things of this nature. If you have diabetes, high blood pressure, other kinds of conditions, they worsen in these kind of captivity environments. You have things like muscle atrophy, you have loss of various things that you would take for granted on an ordinary everyday-to-day basis.
Thank you. And there was one case of a sister who is diabetic and she suffered a psychogenic shock. What happened with that sister and how did the prison guards respond to that?
نعم قلت لك هو في الاول الطبيب ما عرف قال لي هل ابيليبسي قلت له لا مو حاله ابيليبسي هي شوك سينكوبال يعني ممكن تموت المراه تروح فيها قال لي ودوها المستشفى الامراض العقليه انا قلت له ما هكذا قال لي انت مين قلت له انا طبيبه من الجزائر قلت له ما هكذا قلت له ما تعطوها دواء ولا تعطوها يعني حقنه ولا تودوها المستشفى تعملوا لها انعاش ولا قال لي لا ودوها المستشفى ودوها مستشفى الامراض العقليه قلت له ما هكذا الطب ما هذه هي الإنسانية قال لي خلاص ارجعي للجزائر جابت لينا وقال لي خلاص ما فيها.
It was really disturbing to read and see how she was managed. I mean, this was based on an eyewitness account of a person who's also a medic on the ground, and being a diabetic, she lost consciousness and fainted.
Dr. Irfan further explained that individuals dependent on insulin for diabetes are at a risk of hypoglycemic attacks. These attacks occur when insulin causes blood sugar levels to drop dangerously low, leading to symptoms like anxiety, shaking, and a rapid heartbeat. Without prompt action, the person may lose consciousness and experience severe consequences, including death.
A very callous, extremely cold-hearted, non-empathic approach was adopted as the people start to scream. The guards casually come in with cigarettes and accuse the patient of making the whole thing up, and then telling the people there's nothing wrong, knowing this woman is a diabetic and unconscious, saying this is a mental illness and we're going to send her to a mental health hospital. And that just goes to show how incredibly brutal the treatment of the detainees is. And the medic on the ground there is saying, how can you do this? This is so inhumane. The response of the guards and the medic is, well, why don't you go back to Algeria?
What about rights of refugees to medical treatment? Is there anything that we know from the Geneva Convention or from the Human Rights Declaration that could safeguard the rights of refugees to receive medical treatment?
Yes, so this is a controversial topic because although the human rights conventions all say something along the lines of that refugees should essentially have access to the same healthcare opportunities that the local population should have, this is in an idealistic scenario, this rarely happens, unfortunately. And certainly in this case with the detainees in Turkey, it is the case. Not only do the refugees have rights to immediate access to emergency care, but also to preventative medicine care.
I mean, we heard really outrageous things like the prison guards, they give the same medication to the person who has toothache, which they give to the same person that has a stomach ache, and so on and so forth. And the detainees there, they notice these things and they become more unsure and uncertain about which medicine to take and if they're being taken care of at all.
Talk about, I mean, they're not even providing them with the bare necessities. Like you said, it's one drug for all things. Yep, this is a painkiller, this is a sugar pill, this is a blood pressure tablet. It seems like it's one fix for all, and it's really, really horrible and amazing and very insane to hear that this is happening on the ground.
We heard a lot of statements that were leaked about physical torture, also other forms of mental torture, sexual threats, and so on and so forth. Do you feel that this torture is systematic? Is there a pattern to it?
When you look at what is the outcome of torture? I mean, conventionally speaking, it's to extract information, right? You want to put somebody in a unbearable situation where they then divulge this information that is being sought after. And of course, everybody now knows, and it's very well established, that torture is not an effective way to get accurate information from anyone. That's number one. The number two form of torture, which I think is being employed very, very skillfully here, is to create such an unbearable situation and so as to forever deter these people from even considering fleeing from their country where they're facing tremendous and extreme levels of persecution. The goal is to get them to go back to their homeland, treat them in such a way that they wouldn't even consider coming back again, because they will be meted out with this type of brutal punishment, which is now being done in this Denay detention camp.
I mean, what we know from news reports from all around the world is that refugees usually attempt again and again and again and again to cross the same borders. It's a vain hope that torture would prevent people in need whose life is under threat. Yeah, it's just brutality with no purpose, really.
It's an extremely tragic situation, and the idea is to plant that seed of hopelessness, which leads to so many suicides, and people die. They would rather die, and try to make it on the other side. And this is something the Turkish authorities are definitely feeding and propagating by the way they're treating these poor refugees. All you can do is implore and really appeal to these human rights organizations, to the UN, Amnesty, anybody, to look at the plight of these people who, like you said, are being treated even worse than the ordinary person fleeing persecution because on the grounds of their religious beliefs. And I think the efforts being made, here on the ground have been tremendous, but now we really need these human rights organizations to stand up and do what they're there to do, which is to prevent this horrendous violation of human rights that we're seeing. Thank you so much.
After all that we've heard from Dr. Irfan, it's safe to say that whoever is a detainee in Edirne deportation center is not only being physically abused, psychologically abused, specifically by the medical staff and not only the prison guards. Medication is being administered in the wrong way, and people that are in a medically critical condition are being left alone and not attended to. Back to you.
Thank you, Rona, and thank you, Dr. Irfan, for this very important and interesting information about the 104 members of our faith that are detained there and in this horrible condition. But we have here now a testimony of someone else that was with them there. I speak now about Sermat Al-Mahdi, who share a very traumatic and emotional experience with us.
I was detained by the Turkish authorities for a period of 12 days for trying to make a documentary film about 104 asylum seekers trying to legally cross the border from Turkey into Bulgaria. Hi there, my name is Sermat Al-Khafaji. I'm a member of the press. I'm a freelance journalist. I want to tell you about the very last day of my detention, the day they actually released myself and my colleague Alexandra. Around 4 a.m. I had had roughly around 2 hours sleep, and one of the guards came to wake myself up and tell me to get ready to go. Our bus down to go to Istanbul airport. After waiting for a period of maybe 9 hours, 5 of those hours were on the bus. We finally went into the airport to go through the security checks and so on to board our plane. At the very final check, where they were just checking our passports to allow us to go through to the gate, police at the airport said there was a problem, and we were escorted to a police booth where higher ranked police officers examined on the computer and made some calls to determine whether we should be allowed to board our plane or not. Whenever I approached the police at the booth and asked them what was going on, they said there was a problem and that I should wait and step back. One of the gendarmes who had been escorting us approached myself and asked if I was on cocaine. And the reason he asked, I believe, was the way I looked and the fact that I was pacing back and forth. I was pacing because obviously I was a bit nervous about what the outcome would be of the police's decision. And the way I looked was due to a lack of sleep. And obviously, eventually, I sat down on the floor, and so did my colleague Alex, and we just prayed. Like from our hearts, we asked God to help us. Thankfully, within about 5 minutes of this, we were told to stand up, and we were escorted by a police officer and the 2 gendarmes who were with us back to the passport checks, where they took our photos, and then after another 5 minutes of processing, they actually released us into the duty-free area. The relief was overwhelming, and it was only when we actually reached the gate and showed our boarding pass and were processed in that respect that we actually felt relaxed for the first time. And that I'll never forget that day, the 4th of June. The flight was a blur. When we finally arrived in the airport in London, Heathrow, we came off the plane, the moment of relief where we actually came out into the public for the first time. The relief at that moment when we both saw all the members of our extended family, the Ansar of Aba Al-Sadiq, from whom is peace. Every single person who was there out of love, out of compassion, out of pride. Like, I've never felt that much love and adoration
small experience, big trauma.
I keep saying this, but it's a moment I'll never forget in my life, because it was just what I needed at that time. It was exactly what I needed. The pride we felt from them, I'll never forget. And I really wish the whole world can have that feeling, because this is what the Mahdi from Him is Peace wants. He wants humanity to be embraced and loved and comforted and not treated with malice and animosity and aggression the way the Jandarma treated us, who are people in authority. And this is what the truth, and this is what God, and this is what love is, you know. It's that unconditional love that you just don't get unless you just don't understand unless you've experienced. And if it was up to me, every single person who's in need in the world would know that feeling. Every single person who has experienced oppression would know that feeling, because there's no substitute. There really isn't. And there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's too much injustice in the world. And this, like the feeling that we felt from all of our family members, the Ansar, that was justice. That was true justice.
I mean, that was absolutely heartrending to watch. Our brother Sarmat went through so much, and his greatest crime here is what? Documenting the situation as a member of the press. This is how he's treated by Turkish authorities?
Yeah, not only they mistreat journalists, as Sarmat and Alexandra, but they also spread fake news.
On the 24th of May 2023, over 100 members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, a persecuted religious minority, were denied entry and faced violent treatment while seeking asylum at the Turkish-Bulgarian border. We will get into details of how it all began, but let's see how the Turkish media portrayed the event that took place at the border.
Geçtiğimiz gün Edirne'de farklı uyruklarda yaklaşık 100 kişilik bir grup Kapıkule sınır kapısından geçmek istedi, gözaltına alındı.
Valiliğinin açıklamasında kendilerini gazeteci olarak tanıtan Birleşik Krallık uyruklu 2 kişiden bahsedildi.
So far so good. The information presented is correct.
Tolga Şardan, valilik gazeteci olarak görülen 2 İngiliz vatandaşının ajanlık faaliyetleri çerçevesinde bulunduğu iddiasında dedi.
So that is what the Turkish news agency is saying? To spy on what exactly? Which spies would pop up as journalists together with over 100 refugees, as if they instigated against the Turkish government together? That should raise already a question mark on this report.
Ayrıca Edirne Valiliğinin haber ajanslarından haber yapılmamasını rica ettiğini iddia etti.
Why would they do such a thing if it was not something shameful that happened there?
Söz konusu kişilerin İstanbul'da bir süreden beri yaşadıkları biliniyor. Bu süre zarfında kimlerle nasıl bağlantıların?
Absolute lie. We have pictures of them being with us in Britain a day before the incident happened. And it was the first time for both of them to be in Turkey. The passports with entry visa into Turkey are proof of it. Where's your proof, Turkish media?
Yanı sıra eylemcilerin bağlı olduklarını öne sürdükleri Ahmadi Barış ve Işık Dini adlı grubun riskli ve takip edilmesi gereken yapılar içinde olup olmadığı sorusu da yanıtsız.
So why do they want to keep them inside the country then if they are unsure about their intentions? These people want to get out of the country. The Turkish media called these refugees Afghani and Syrian. Not that there is anything wrong with being from Afghanistan or Syria, but the fact is that none of these 101 members are from Afghanistan or Syria. Is there some insinuation you're trying to make? Are you trying to make people think these innocent refugees are associated with some sort of terrorist group? Here we have an article that claims that they were not refugees. And in the same paper and another paper, it says that the people wanted to enter the customs site by force. But it's clear that you seem to be okay with not telling the truth. Let's get back to before the article was released. These people were targeted by their governments in their home countries for believing in the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. Core teachings involving beliefs like the Kaaba not being in Mecca but rather in Petra, Jordan, cancellation of the 5 daily prayers, and the permitting of consuming alcohol was the cause for the governments to declare the believers to be heretics and apostates of the religion of Islam. In other words, it is permissible to kill them. Therefore, they had an easy and legal option, which was to move to Turkey temporarily. They gathered in Turkey to figure out what to do. The EU has a rule which states that if you make it into EU territory and you need asylum, you will be granted asylum. At the same time, you are not allowed to break into the EU cutting fences. So they applied by the only realistic and legal option that is given in their situation. They contacted all the organizations needed to issue an open letter from the Border Violence Monitoring Network, along with over 25 other human rights organizations, urging the Bulgarian authorities and the European Border and Coast Guard Agency to fulfill their obligations under European Union law and international human rights law, to get them past the border to get into Bulgaria, urging the Bulgarian authorities and the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, Frontex, to fulfill their obligations under European Union law and international human rights law, to let them pass the border to get into Bulgaria. Several human rights organizations had coordinated to grant protection to the group and allow them an opportunity to lodge an application for international protection at the Bulgarian border. After all of this preparation happened, they were expected by the Bulgarians and they themselves expected to be granted entry. Why should they not? So the 2 British journalists came over to Turkey to film the whole event that was taking place. The Turkish border police stopped them, beat them up, stressed them all out, and imprisoned them all, including women and children. That's why the Turkish media didn't want the event to be covered, because they executed shameful behavior and violated human rights.
Ever since the time of Adam, those who have followed the divinely chosen leaders have been persecuted. Satan declared a war against Adam and his children to attack them in every way that he can.
And now a closer look at a director of one of the human rights organizations that's been standing by our side in this entire situation from the beginning. Let's go and take a closer look at the director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, Willy Fautré.
We would like to introduce Willy Fautré, a distinguished advocate for human rights who has played a pivotal role in providing unwavering support to the Ahmadi region of peace and light. Fautré has tirelessly advanced the cause of our religion as a persecuted religious minority while also striving to secure official recognition from esteemed international entities such as the United Nations. Fautré's steadfast dedication to the principles of human rights has been evident throughout his illustrious career. Former chargé de mission at the cabinet of the Belgian Ministry of Education and at the Belgian Parliament, he is the director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, or HRWF, an NGO based in Brussels that he founded in December 1988. HRWF is independent from any political movement and any religion. Fautré has carried out fact-finding missions on human rights in more than 25 countries, including in perilous regions such as Iraq, in Sandinist Nicaragua, or in Maoist-held territories of Nepal. He is a lecturer in universities in the field of human rights. He has published many articles in university journals about relations between state and religions. He is a member of the Press Club in Brussels. He is a human rights advocate at the UN, the European Parliament, and the OSCE. As the leader and founder of the HRWF, he has staunchly defended the rights of ethnic and religious minorities, fought for freedom of expression, and stood up for the rights of women and the LGBTQI community. His resolute commitment to these fundamental values has positioned Human Rights Without Frontiers as a leading advocate for the protection and preservation of human rights worldwide. Under Fautré's astute guidance, Human Rights Without Frontiers has been an unwavering source of support for the Ahmadi region of peace and light in the humanitarian crisis happening in Turkey. The organization has fearlessly shed light on the persecution faced by members of our faith since day one, consistently amplifying their voices, exposing the injustice they endure, bringing their struggles to the forefront of public discourse, and rallying support for our cause. Fautre, having also an important part of his activities connected to the press, has garnered significant attention from various media outlets, including reputable publications such as the European Times and EU Report. Most recently, his efforts, in collaboration with the organization like CAP, Freedom of Conscience, contributed to a compelling statement issued by UN experts. This statement called on Turkey to halt the deportation of the 101 detained members, highlighting the human rights concerns surrounding their potential return to their countries of origin. His commitment to human rights and advocacy efforts have significantly contributed to the recognition of our faith as a persecuted religious minority. Fautre's loyal dedication to the principles of justice and equality serves as an inspiration for human rights defenders worldwide.
Welcome back to our program. We're joined right now with our dear sisters, Dr. Alia Al-Mahdi and Amina Al-Mahdi, who are going to give us a bit of an overview of the condition of the minors who are currently still detained in the Aderna Deportation Center. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Alia, we know that currently there are in that group 22 minors who are still in detainment. Can you give us a bit of an overview on what must the conditions be like for them at the moment?
Yes, from the first moment of contact with the Turkish police up till now, these kids have been object to traumatic experiences. Physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual harassment. And so these situations and these experiences are known to cause both short-term and long-term effects on the child mental health and also sometimes physical health. Every single one of them, when they mention about how the situation is in the of the healthcare in that detaining center, it is just horrible.
It is.
The doctor is inhumane. The doctor is not caring about their health. They mention situations where everybody that goes with a condition, they come back with the same medicine. Mehdi, who was 8 years, and his mother, he has problem with slow digestion because of the bad quality of the food, processed and not healthy. They were trying to get help from a doctor, but it took so long time. But at the end, they went there, and one of the comments of the doctor there or the people there, why did you bring your child with you? So they are blaming the mom for fleeing from her country because of persecution, and blaming her for bringing her child with her.
I mean, this raises a very important point right now, I think, which has to do with the rights of these people.
Yeah.
Dr. Alia, we know that the testimonies are saying that the children were deprived of food for days, water. This happened several times to them.
Yeah.
They were exposed to cold weather. And I'm sure all of these kinds of treatments, the physical and the mental abuse, as you've said, have long-term effects. There are studies, I believe, that also go into that, correct?
Yeah, of course. We have many studies about these situations. There's a study that is called Adverse Childhood Experiences in Child Refugee and Asylum Seeking Population, where it goes through what the situations are that these children are exposed to and what's the consequences of these situations. This study shows that 30% of the young people that are refugees and that are settled in Europe, they have 30% of them, they have mental issues, mental health problems. Of course, it depends on how long they have been exposed to the refugee situation, the violence, But here now we have kids been in that situation for 1 month, and this shows that the consequences of this is that they get, for example, depression. They get anxiety disorders, and one of the most common disorder that people who have been exposed to trauma that they find in these children is post-traumatic stress disorder.
One word that comes again and again when we listen to these testimonies is inhumanity. Really a horrific condition on this level, and we see the guards, they're really treating these innocent people who their only crime is to flee from a horrible situation where they are facing death sentences, torture, and prison. In this group, we have elderly people, we have people with health condition, and we have children. And it has to be that even in these hidden and forgotten places,
we need to have some legal basis to regulate these places. And we are lucky today to have you, Amina, who is our legal compliance officer. So maybe you can share with us some information about that.
Sure. Yes, thank you so much, Brother Arno. As we are aware, and as the viewers will be aware as well, we have an overarching body called the United Nations, which hundreds of countries are signatories to around the world, Turkey being one of the signatories to the United Nations conventions, meaning that when it signed these treaties, it is saying, and it joined the United Nations, it is saying that it is going to adhere to all of the laws, the regulations that the United Nations comes up with. One of these conventions that the United Nations has developed over time and through a lot of thorough research and based on outcomes such as Dr. Alia has mentioned, that children have undergone when they go through a refugee crisis. It's called the Committee on the Rights of Children, and they've come up with this CRC, the Committee on the Rights of Children, have come up with several different papers and several different recommendations and several different laws detailing what the children should not have done to them, how they should be treated, and what is legal and what's illegal in terms of how to treat children, particularly in an asylum and refugee situation. And one of the United Nations Committees on the Rights of Children reports from 2012, it's called the Day of General Discussion, if the viewers want to look it up. In paragraph 78, it says children should not be criminalized or subject to punitive measures because of their or their parents' migration status. The detention of a child because of their or their parents' migration status constitutes the child's rights violations and always contravenes the principle of the best interest of the child. So already these children have been penalized because their parents decided to try to flee persecution in their home countries. But as we've seen time and time again, as Dr. Ali has pointed out, when people come knocking on their door, the people who are within their custody are not being treated humanely and they're not being treated correctly, especially the children. In this case, they're being treated illegally. Actually, it's against all the United Nations conventions, and the UNHCR, which is the United Nations Agency on Refugees, have also had another special report. It was done in 2015. And it's called the Thematic Report on Torture and Ill Treatment of Children Deprived of Their Liberty, which applies to these children, of course, because they're being deprived of their liberty, they're being held in detention, which is actually not supposed to happen. And this report from 2015 says, within the context of administration of immigration enforcement, it is now clear that the deprivation of liberty of children based on their or their parents' migration status is never in the best interest of the child, and it exceeds the requirement of necessity, and it becomes grossly disproportionate and may constitute cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment of the migrant children. And the Special Rapporteur shares the view that of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, that when the child's best interests require keeping the family together, the imperative requirement is that not to deprive the child of liberty, and it extends to the child's parents as well. And it requires that the authorities choose the alternative measures for the detention of the entire family, which could be relocating them to a family outside, like a host family, for instance, in Turkey, that would be able to help them so that they're not witnessing these traumas that Dr. Ali has spoken of, and they're not being mistreated. The United Nations has made the recommendation and actually said that no country should detain children. They should be removed from detention immediately and put with families while they're being processed. Whatever the outcome is going to be in the interim, they shouldn't be in detention because it's such a vulnerable place for children where they can be taken to the bathroom and God knows what happens, beaten or sexually abused.
Which we know has been happening.
Exactly. Well, so it's completely illegal and it's completely against the United Nations conventions. And Turkey has once again shown that they do not adhere to any of the international conventions and they don't care. And the United Nations really needs to take some action now to save their own face.
You'd hope that this would be a very logical approach in general, but the fact that it's put into law and still not practiced is a very great crime and a shame. Thank you so much for joining us and making this very clear for the viewers.
Apocalyptic weather. A look at some of the apocalyptic signs of these end times seen in nature with Kevin Al-Mehdi. Algerian members face severe persecution. Gain first-hand insight into the plight of our Algerian members as Redouane Foufa's niece shares their stories of severe persecution under the Algerian government's extremist stance. Bishop Hamid Reza Sagheri exposes sinister abuse by Iranian government. Exclusive interview. It sheds light on the dark reality of the Iranian government's mistreatment inflicted upon members of the faith. Humane teachings under attack. James Al-Mehdi highlights extremist intolerance in the Middle East as he explores the clash between humane teachings found within our holy gospel and the intolerance exhibited by extremist governments in the Middle East. Professor Arya Rasfar unveils genocide indicators. Exclusive interview on treatment of our members. In an eye-opening interview, Professor Arya Rasfar breaks down the disturbing indicators of genocide, drawing attention to the treatment of the members of our faith. Join our special correspondent Runa Al-Mehdi as she engages in a conversation with journalist Alexandra Foreman about her personal experience of joining the community of believers. Aba Al-Sadiq's perspective on the refugee crisis, a divine viewpoint. We explore Aba Al-Sadiq's latest statement on the critical global issue of the refugee crisis and hear a profound perspective from his divine standpoint. Join our social media representative as he provides an insightful glimpse into the goal of the wise, our holy gospel. And finally, for spiritual peace and divine connection, join Brother Arnold for a moment of meditation. This is Divine Just State.
And now for some of the more apocalyptic signs that we see in today's day and age. Let's go to the weather with Kevin Al-Mehdi.
Thank you very much, Alia. Let's go to the weather news of this week. Several major destructive floods and heavy rains have been occurring in the past few days. On Thursday, the 6th of July, a dramatic flash flood hit Zaragoza, the capital city of the Aragon region of Spain, after experiencing heavy rainfall within a short period. The storm caused multiple high water rescues by firefighters as floodwaters swept through the city. The floods resulted in flooded homes, damaged roads, and the destruction of a school building. Several videos shared on social media show the powerful floodwaters engulfing central parts of Zaragoza. The depth of the floods reached an estimated 2 meters. The region also suffered crop damage due to heavy rain. The local government estimates that repairing the damages caused by the floods will require an investment of millions of euros. Meteorologists have described the storm as historic. And speaking about hailing, look at these pictures. They all come from different provinces of Spain, which have been also experiencing severe hailstorms. Look at the size of the hailstones. All these pictures come from this past week alone. In Indonesia, a cold lava flood, also known as a lahar, caused by Mount Semeru in Lumajang, East Java, on Saturday, the 8th of July, has led to the declaration of a 14-day state of emergency by the local authorities. Extreme weather conditions, including heavy rainfall and landslides, have resulted in flooding and damage to several villages in the region. Evacuation efforts have been made and temporary shelters have been set up. As a consequence of the lahar floods, bridges have been severed, roads have become impassable, and traffic diversion have been implemented. A lahar is a mixture of volcanic materials and water that can flow rapidly down slopes, posing risks to human lives and infrastructure. They are considered to be among the most destructive natural disasters. A lahar was responsible, for example, for the destruction of the ancient cities of the Herculaneum and Pompeii during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. And on Sunday, the 9th of July, the images speak for themselves. The state of Himachal Pradesh, along with several other parts of North India, was severely affected by heavy rains and flash floods. The torrential rain caused landslides, flooding, and damage to key infrastructure for the state, resulting in numerous casualties and disrupting normal life in the region. At least 18 people lost their lives in rain-related incidents, including landslides and house collapses. Most rivers in the region overflowed. The civic system has struggled to cope with the record rainfall, leaving roads and residential areas submerged. Several major landslides and flash floods have been reported, causing road closures and stranding hundreds of people. The damage includes numerous collapsed bridges, washed away roads, and submerged structures. The state government closed schools and colleges for 2 days, and authorities urged the people to avoid venturing near rivers and stay vigilant. So, the audiences watching these events at home should really ask themselves, what is the significance of all the natural disasters happening recently? We have previously talked about the still ongoing heat waves all across the globe. Since then, the Copernicus Earth Observation Program has reported that past June was the hottest June since we have started recording the weather. that past Monday, the 3rd of July, was the hottest day on record with a global average of 16.88 degrees Celsius, and that just next day, Tuesday, the 4th of July, the previous day's world record was broken again with a global average of 17.03 degrees Celsius. Unofficial data from the University of Maine's Climate Change Institute has reported that past Thursday also broke the previous two records with a global average of 17.23 degrees Celsius. I mean, look at this chart. The thick blue line represents this year recorded global temperatures. The temperatures of 2022 are represented here in orange. All the gray lines represent the temperatures from 1985 till 2021. But look at how separated this year's lines is from the previous year's record. And why am I mentioning this? Well, when we talked about the heat waves, I mentioned that several different natural disasters are a direct consequence of high temperatures. And of course, it is pretty easy to see that a rise in temperatures would naturally cause something like a drought, and a drought would naturally increase the risk of a wildfire. But heavy rainfalls leading to floods can also be linked to a rise in temperature. How? Well, if the atmosphere is hotter, the water molecules in the air are more likely to be in a gas phase, meaning as vapor in the air, making the clouds denser and the downpours, of course, more intense. This takes us back to the words of the riser of the family of Mohammed, Aba Al-Sadiq, Abdullah Hashem, from him is peace, who released a statement on the 28th of April 2023 saying, "The planet will seek to destroy mankind just as the immune system seeks to destroy an infection." And what are we seeing right now? What happens when the immune system wants to destroy an infection? It raises its temperature. And this is why we get a fever when there is a nocive virus or bacteria in our bodies. And in the same way that this fever triggers a series of mechanisms that regulate our immune system, the planet Earth is clearly seeming to have set in motion a series of events to get rid of the infection that is plaguing it. And that's human beings. Let's face it, human beings have been destroying not only the environment through pollution and carelessness, but in general, the world is full of sin, of all kinds. It is natural that people have become like an infection, bringing down more and more bad karma every single day. What else can we expect to see around the world? Corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea by what the hands of the people have earned, so he may let them taste part of what they have done, so that perhaps they may return. Return to God as He subhanahu wa ta'ala in all that what He has done and is doing in the world wants the people of the earth to pay attention, as perhaps they would be guided to the truth. And the Almighty said, "And verily we shall make them taste from the lower punishment before the greater punishment, that perhaps they may return." And the Almighty said, "And every sign that we show them is greater than its sister sign, and we grasp them with the torments, that perhaps they may return." And the Almighty said, "And verily we have destroyed villages around you and displayed our signs, that perhaps they may return." Return to God, return to the truth, return to the book of God and its people, as in your return to the truth is the best of this world and the hereafter, and the salvation for you from the torment in this world and the hereafter. And there is no other choice for salvation, as this is the day of God in which His supporters are victorious. These are the words of Imam Ahmed al-Hassan, from him is peace, which ring truer every single day. And the fulfillment of the words of Aba Al-Sadiq, Abdullah Hashem, from him is peace, has already begun. And this is only the beginning. Listen to the words of Aba Al-Sadiq again and pay close attention, because there is no way to escape what's going to come except by becoming a supporter to the vicegerent of God on earth, and that is Aba Al-Sadiq, Abdullah Hashem, from him is peace. Thank you very much, and see you next week. Back to you.
That was Kevin Al-Mahdi with the weather. Thank you so much, Kevin. Let's go to an interview with Yasmine Al-Mahdi, the niece of Ridwan Fufa, one of the detained members.
They were not criminals. They were not doing any illegal activity. They did nothing that made how they were dealt with okay. There was no crime that they had committed. It was simply because of their belief in the religion. They broke in, terrorizing the people living in the house, including one old woman and children. They took their personal belongings, identification documents, electronic devices. It was honestly an unreal experience to know this could happen. They did nothing to deserve such treatment. So when Rodwan, Kherdin and Sherif were in prison, Rodwan had some health issues, and he actually had COVID and then followed with a heart attack. He lost a lot of weight, and the thing is they were so careless with them that if it wasn't for Kherdin, Rodwan would have been dead at this time, because he was having a heart attack, but no one came to help him. And actually the time that they spent there in prison was really mentally tiring, because people even in prison were like calling them kuffar, and they were calling them names, and the guards and the people in there made sure that everyone does that to them. After they were arrested, and for the people who were under house arrest, there was a sister Rabha who has some kids with her, and her family to put pressure on her to leave the house and to leave the religion, to drop it. What they did is they had this official document from a higher official in Algiers, which is the capital of Algeria, where he allowed them to go and take her kids just because she believed in that religion, and somehow they were scared for the kids. So her family just went there in the house like with a lot of men, and they started like hitting the doors and shouting at them, putting pressure on them and trying to scare them, and telling her, we're gonna take your kids if you don't drop it. And this is how Algeria faction, it's like you don't want to follow our law, that what we do is we put like the whole community, Algerian community, against you, and we will use anything. Even if we have to take the kids from you, if you're not doing what we want, then this is what's gonna happen. Can you imagine, like, you spend half a year being persecuted by the government and the Algerian community, and you were living in a space where you were actually feeling secure because you were with your own people, and then they release you out there with those monsters and are ready to kill you because you believe in something completely different for them. So the Minister of Religion came out with this fatwa against them that they should be stopped. So these people are apostates. They mocked our religion and they don't believe in what we believe. So they have to stop because they believe that the alcohol is permissible. But excuse me, for the people who live in Algeria, I mean, you come into a town after, like, you see trees. The first thing that you see from the town is a bar. I mean, alcohol is everywhere, so I don't know exactly what they are saying. And because we believe that Ramadan, it's not when they think it is by following the moon, but we believe that it's in December. So because of this, these people have to be stopped.
Let's dive now more in depth in the situation of our members in Iran with the Bishop of Iran, Hamid Reza Al-Mahdi.
She said, brother, I thought that I'm gonna die.
The Bishop of Iran and Afghanistan, Hamid Reza Al-Mahdi, gave us a quick glimpse into the various cases of persecution seen by members of the faith in Iran.
3 of our members got arrested. Undercover police officers went to their houses, knocked on their doors. They even strangled one of them. One of our members got slapped a few times in front of his family members, in front of his young daughters. He was threatened with death right in front of his 10-year-old daughter.
He took us through the state's intolerance towards different religions other than the religion that sponsors the Iranian governmental structure of Wilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the jurisprudence.
The Iranian government is very well known to be extremely harsh with people who believe in other religions other than Islam, other than their own Islam, because they have their own definition of Islam. Khomeini and Khamenei are the two main leaders in Iran who have introduced this kind of belief.
Hamid Reza took us through horrifying accounts of members being tied down and even force-fed drugs.
One of the family members of one of the dear sisters by the name of Layla, they tied her up and they took her by force to a hospital. They force-fed her antipsychotic medicines, and she's saying until now she's traumatized. You know, she cannot sleep at nights.
He also told us about Sayyid Ali, a young man and a father who had to flee for his life after being persecuted.
We also have many other extreme cases, such as Sayyid Ali, who is another member of our religion, who was beaten up by the undercover police officers to the point that his head was split open, and he was about to die. So they rushed him to hospital, and after he felt better, he escaped the country immediately. He knew that he's going to get killed.
These accounts of persecution, among many others, were the result of the beliefs of this religion being published in the religion's holy gospel, The Goal of the Wise.
Especially after the release of this book, things started getting very serious. They decided that they wanted to leave the country. They were seeking asylum. They were looking for a safe place to live. So 15 of these Iranians, they gathered together. They got on a bus, but unfortunately, the Iranian authorities, they arrested them. They even fired at them with the guns.
Hamid Reza went on to detail the treatment faced by these innocent men, women, and children at the hands of the Iranian government in December of 2022.
Amongst them, there were 2 kids, there were women, and then they blindfolded them, they tied up their hands and their feet, and they transferred them to Evin prison. Very dark rooms, they were not giving them enough food, enough water, they were just very little. One of our members got beaten up when they were on their way to Evin prison, and another member was beaten up really badly inside Evin prison. Why? Because he asked for water. That's all.
Hamid Reza explained the humanitarian crisis faced by these Iranian members at having been forced to remain in the detainment center as a consequence of trying to follow legal routes to cross borders and seek asylum as refugees.
One of our members, actually, he lost his house, he lost his 2 kids, and I don't think he can ever see his 2 kids again, and also lost his wife because they stayed back and he had to flee the country for his life by the name of Ali Reza Akbari. And right now he is in the refugee camp in Turkey trying to find a safe place to live. At the borders, the Turkish border police officers, they took them, they beat them up, they treated them so bad. One of the other members that we have is a woman by the name of Zahra. She's 52 years old. And Zahra, she also managed to flee the country. And when they went to the borders, Turkish-Bulgarian borders, actually the Turkish police, they beat her up really badly. And she was suffocating. She started screaming and she said, I cannot breathe. Help me out. And police officers, they just left her to the point that she passed out. And she fell down. She fell down on the ground. And other Iranian sisters, when they saw that, they were trying to go help her, but the police, they didn't let them. And Sister Zahra was on the ground for about 20-25 minutes. You know, you have to understand, this woman is 52 years old. And when I talked to her after a few days, she said, brother, I thought that I'm gonna die. And she said, these people have no humanity in them. They have no understanding. And I felt like I'm in a jungle and there is a bunch of wild animals jumping on me. They are trying to eat me alive. That's how she felt. And this is how our innocent members have been treated all these years.
The fight to free these innocent people and find a safe refuge for them continues.
This area was a lot. How did you feel during this interview?
I mean, it's very clear that these members have had no respite whatsoever, neither in Iran nor in Turkey. And hopefully, now that the news is being more on a global scale, they will receive some sort of refuge and asylum, which they truly deserve. They've done nothing wrong. So that was a little perspective into how the Iranian members have been treated so far. Why is all this happening? Why is this happening to so many people around the world who believe in the Ahmadi religion of peace and light? We have our brother James Al-Mahdi, who's actually going to be going into the very important reason behind all of this, which is the publishing of our Holy Gospel, the goal of the wise.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a thought-provoking information piece of our program. Today we dive into our Holy Gospel, the goal of the wise, and explore some of its intriguing teachings which have sparked controversy within Muslim-majority countries. Countries that insist on their own state-sponsored versions of Islam and have very extreme reactions to other schools of thought. Buckle up for a journey into uncharted territories of faith. The Ahmadi religion of peace and light has the Star of David as its very own symbol. Shocking? Well, if you're in a Muslim-majority country in the Middle East, you may find this strange. In Muslim-majority countries, this star is met with skepticism and accusations of a secret Zionist agenda. But did you know that the Star of David is actually the star that comes from David, or Dawood, peace be upon him, a beloved prophet of God mentioned in the Holy Quran? In the goal of the wise, we find that in the Seventh Covenant, the prohibition on alcohol from Islam has been lifted, and the headscarf is considered optional. These bold statements have sparked heated debates and divided communities. Members living in countries like Iraq and Saudi Arabia are in serious danger simply for holding these beliefs, let alone practicing them. Diversity meets faith. The Ahmadi religion of peace and light opens its doors to people from all walks of life and orientations. But in Muslim-majority countries, such inclusivity is met with hostility, condemnation, and even capital punishment. Members of our religion who hold these humane values from the goal of the wise have been shot at, beaten over the head, and threatened with violence, assault, and sexual abuse. The goal of the wise questions conventional interpretations of these scriptures. We challenge the so-called divine authority of fallible scholars and encourage believers to think critically for themselves. This audacity to question has raised eyebrows and sparked fierce debates. Debates in which extremist Muslim scholars, even from Al-Azhar University in Egypt, have decided that simply on this basis, members of our religion are deserving of execution. And not only that, countries such as Iran and Iraq have imprisoned our members for not having absolute submission towards their scholarly politicians. We're about to raise a topic of great controversy, yet one which is very necessary to be discussed: the true location of the most sacred site for Muslims worldwide, the Holy Kaaba. The goal of the wise explains with evidence that Saudi Arabia simply cannot be the true location of this holiest of holies of God, and proposes with scientific evidence that the true location of the Kaaba is in fact in Petra, Jordan. This fact, while absolutely irrefutable once you know the evidence, is taken by governments of these Middle Eastern Muslim majority states as heresy and blasphemy. And we all know what blasphemy leads to if you're living under an extremist government. Now, this was just a small glimpse into our gospel, the goal of the wise. We've traversed controversial territory, questioned age-old practices, and explored new perspectives. Remember, the world of faith is vast and filled with diverse beliefs. Stay curious, keep seeking knowledge, and always be open to evolving your understanding. Until next time, may your spiritual journeys be enlightening.
Yeah, my experience and research in genocide has focused on testimonies and the symbolization and the linguistic markers that sort of precede genocidal conditions, 10 criterion that sort of are the precursors or the characteristics of a genocide, creating a them versus us, hate speech, name calling, words like agents, foreign agents, these are terms that we've seen in the testimonies that are emerging from the detention camp in Turkey. Before there's a physical genocide, there's always a cultural and a symbolic genocide. Obviously, persecution, extermination, and in most cases, denial. Denial would be sort of when these things are denied, then these are sort of the clear-cut indicators of a genocidal situation. That the countries that the detainees in Turkey are facing, they come from countries that are at the emergency level, especially when you talk about a country like Turkey, you talk about a country like Iran. They've already shown, especially the letters and the speeches that came out of the UN, confirmed this, that there are conditions for ethnic and religious minorities are quite frankly, at the warning level of the genocidal indicators. Proofs of all these different characteristics in all the testimonies. One example that really struck me was the letter from a 10-year-old girl named Mariam,
yes,
which I'm sure everybody has watched. Look at the handwriting, look at the words that, hear the words that she's saying. She talks about her mother and her being separated from their father, being in atrocious conditions. I mean, if I remember correctly, she talks about the toilets being disgusting.
Yes.
She talks about sleeping on the floor, only being let out 1 hour a day in the sunlight. I mean, these are horrific conditions that even humane prisons don't have these types of conditions. Let alone people who are innocent of any crime. Alhamdulillah, this is being recognized and the word is spreading. Of course, there's still a lot to be done.
Yes.
But this is something that is very critical and it's at a critical level. The moment of truth for Turkey has arrived, and this goes back to even their recent history of denying what they did to the Armenians. Denial is probably the icing on the cake when it comes to the genocide indicators. In this day and age, when everything is being live streamed and recorded, which we've talked about a lot as being the key to the protection, I mean, the conditions would be definitely worse because we don't want to act after the body bags are flown in front of us. I mean, that's too late.
Absolutely.
And you say it looks not even like a prison, and the word that were coming into my mind was it looks like a concentration camp. It is very similar horrifically to the Anne Frank letters and notes of her famous or infamous journal.
When a nation or an empire is dying and feels threatened, and they feel like their identity is being lost, that's when they tend to go towards these types of practices. So there's some insecurity psychologically, civilizational that's happening. I mean, this is obviously a low point of a disintegrating nation state or empire that ends up doing things like this. So we find that a lot of the Muslim world, Muslim majority land, they've sort of been in this condition for a long time, and that's why it's hard for them to practice transparency, authenticity, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. I mean, they've been authoritarian dictatorships for a very long time.
Yes.
And a lot of that is rooted in their understanding of religion. So they use religion to create this type of atmosphere. And so when a religion rises that challenges the fundamentals of that, that has to be squashed. That has to be removed.
I find it remarkable that we find that in Europe the sentiment of never again came up, and it was lauded and it was upheld. And you find that that kind of understanding exists, and that's why we find that there are human rights today that perhaps were not seen some years ago or decades ago. But then you find that this understanding just doesn't exist in the Middle East, unfortunately. And especially we see right now with Turkey, the way it's treating these detained people, these detained members. It's really sad, because you'd hope that a country that says that it's Islamic or a Muslim state would understand that we should be the ones who hold up never again, not the Europeans or the European Union. However, we find it to be the other way around. It says a lot, I think, about the Middle East right now and the understanding of Islam today. That's completely corrupt.
And so you have to question, what their interpretation or what their understanding of religion is, in particular what their understanding of Islam is. I mean, in the case of Iran, for example, Baha'is can't go to universities, cannot go to colleges.
My goodness.
And, these types of actions show weakness. They're in sort of these conditions that Maryam is talking about, because why? I mean, because, she's separated from her father, and she can't see him. I mean, what's their crime? And, Turkey and all Muslim nations that are seeing this will have to answer to this in their own conscience and before the world.
So I think it's very important that we also acknowledge something here, which is that the community that we are, a global community of believers in this religion, in Aba Al-Sadiq, from his peace, a community of believers worldwide that hold the goal of the wise as our holy gospel. We do have something very unique that we pride ourselves in, and that is our diversity and how we come from all walks of life and from all around the world.
Yeah, I think we are really experimenting and living on a daily basis, and we have people really from all walk of lives, from all different professions, different status, economic status, from different creed, different races, different sexual orientation. We really have like a mini earth, a mini society, human society.
Difference of race, difference of background, skin color, all these very trivial, minor, irrelevant differences which should never take the center stage. But right now we find in the world that that's taking place. People are so segregated and divided based on very ridiculous reasons. And we see from Aba Al-Sadiq's teachings, from his peace, that it doesn't have to be that way. And we've lived it for over a decade now.
And you have a lot of even of racism inside the religion. And we find here exactly the opposite. And it's just this bubble of hope that we are so proud to live, and we want to share. We want the people to know our leader, Aba Al-Sadiq, from him his peace. We want them to research and to get to know what we know and what we live, really.
And it's not just us. One of our sisters, Alexandra Foreman Al-Mahdi, also had the same experience. Our special correspondent, Runa Al-Mahdi, she actually went out and interviewed her on that. Let's take a look.
We met Alexandra Al-Mahdi, a member of the UK press and also a member of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, to see her perspective on the diverse community of believers in the riser Aba Al-Sadiq, from him is peace.
The community is very, very diverse. There's people from every different background, every ethnicity, every religion, and everyone just fits together really, really well. There's so much harmony. Everyone just works together. There's no superficial differences. It's just not noticed basically. I've never seen anything like it before, really. I think on the outside world, I think people would really easily get bothered by minor issues or skin color or religion, definitely. And people would sort of segregate together into groups, but it's just not like that here at all. And I found everyone to be so incredibly welcoming and kind to me, and just those minor differences, don't notice them at all anymore.
We asked her how it must have felt for her coming to a place with so many people from different places.
I don't really know what I expected. I definitely haven't seen anything like this before. I think when I was living in London, it's very multicultural, and usually in London people can get along quite well together, but also there's always people segregate together and fight about minor issues. They fight about religious differences a lot. And I just, obviously haven't seen anything like that here at all. Well, I think what keeps people together here is Aba Al-Sadiq and everyone's love for him and everyone listening to what he says and obviously having the same beliefs aspect. Like, everyone is so nice here and really, really kind and so thoughtful, and it sounds weird, but that was actually quite hard to get used to after living in London, where I'm just sort of used to it being quite like everyone out for themselves.
Alexandra went on to explain why it was that this community is able to live and work in harmony, despite all the differences.
I actually always thought that would be an ideal way to live, like in a community with people and everyone working together and helping each other. But I thought the way that humanity is and the way the world works is something that would never be possible. And it's something obviously that is possible here with Aba Al-Sadiq and is possible with our beliefs being the same. I think on the outside world it just seemed like something that was hopeless, but I think it really is obviously the ideal way for people to be living. I think it's just the love he has for everyone and the way that he cares for everyone and he looks after things, he knows what's best and we can all trust that, and everyone loves him back and everyone wants to do things for the love they have for him and then obviously for the love they have for each other, and that's how it works. There's just so much less selfishness here than there is in the outside world.
Alexandra is one of the journalists who went to the Turkish-Bulgarian border to document the attempted legal border crossing. She met with a group of over 100 believers from different countries. We asked her about the experience.
No, so they were from 8 different countries, but they all obviously had met together in Turkey. I don't know, there were like a few differences between them, but like they all got on so well, and they all had obviously the love for Aba Al-Sadiq in common, the love for the religion in common, and yeah, they were just the most incredible people really. Like, they were so strong and they'd coped with the most horrific experiences and they were just ready to take on more and more just because they love Aba Al-Sadiq and they love the religion and they love God. And yeah, nothing really fazed them the whole time. Like, I really just learned a lot from living with them and being with them. Obviously, like, they're in horrific conditions. They didn't know when they're going to get home. They're still there, but they're still staying strong throughout all of that. I think people outside should know that we don't need to accept living life in a really depressing way and not trusting each other and not being there for each other and worrying about things all the time and worrying about what's going to happen and being taken advantage of by leaders who don't care about us. And yeah, I think there's a better way to live that makes more sense for humans to live and it's more natural for us. And it's just a matter of taking that leap of faith and, accepting that things can change, because I think there's so much negativity in the world. People just, well, this is definitely what I was like. I was just like, okay, nothing's ever going to work, nothing's ever going to change. Just seeing everything the way it's been, and especially the way the government takes advantage of people in this country. It's just, yeah, things can change. We just need to give it a chance and make the effort.
This was Alexandra Ala Al-Mehdi, who just recently joined the community. So we heard from her, a person with a fresh perspective. Why is it that we all get along here in this divine community? The point is that we do all come from different backgrounds, different cultures, totally different nations and countries. But whenever there is a disagreement or a difference in opinion, we remind ourselves that we came here to unite on goodness. We came here to unite on the supreme principle, which is God. We came here to unite and support the man who's filled with the Spirit of God. Back to you, back to the studio.
The riser from the family of Muhammad Aba Al-Sadiq, from him his peace, has made many statements regarding different global crises worldwide. One of the issues that are persisting is the issue of the refugees. Now, if you're interested in understanding what exactly does God think of all this, let's take a look at what Aba Al-Sadiq from his peace has to say about the God of the refugees.
In ancient Greece, Aphrodite was the goddess of passion and pleasure and those who were to get married. In ancient Egypt, Sobek was the god of the army and military. And in ancient Rome, Ceres was the goddess of the farmers and crops. If the God of the Torah, Gospels, and Quran could be described as the God of one thing or one group of people, he would be described as the God of the migrants and refugees. For our very story as human beings begins with Adam and Eve, who after being banished from the Garden of Eden are refugees wandering as foreigners in the land. Noah builds an ark to take refuge from the flood. Abraham is told by God, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Abraham goes to Egypt as a refugee seeking protection from the famine. The Egyptian king attempts to rape Sarah, and God inflicts him with serious diseases because of his taking advantage of Sarah, the refugee. Lot has to migrate to Sodom. God destroys the people of Sodom because of how they treated the refugees and migrants who came to their land. Joseph and Jacob migrate to Egypt. And not only them, but also Jesus and his parents were refugees in Egypt. And Muhammad and his companions migrated to Medina after he was oppressed in Mecca. You are to have the same law for the foreigners and the native-born. I am the Lord your God. The migrant children of Jacob and Joseph are enslaved by Pharaoh and oppressed, and for that, God sends 10 plagues against Egypt. God then tells Moses, and he said, "Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt." And today, even you, my pure friends, stand as foreigners in the land like the prophets and messengers before you. You were beat and prevented from passing through God's earth. You were detained and imprisoned. You are threatened with being sent back to Pharaoh and Nimrod, from whom you escaped. The God of the migrants and refugees, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad will look after you and make for you a way that never crossed their minds. Just as he made Abraham rich and gave him Hajar, just as he brought Joseph to the throne of Egypt after he was in prison, and just as he gave Muhammad an army in Medina to conquer Mecca, so shall he do for you. The followers of Moses said, "We are being overtaken." He said, "No, my Lord is with me. He will guide me." Do as you will, for verily, you are but paving the way for the inheritor.
I'm here today with our brother Hussam al-Hakim. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. He goes, alayhi salam, in the post, talking about, for example, the start of when the status of refugee started. You know, when did the human being actually became a refugee? It started with Adam and Eve. Even the Prophet Muhammad and the believers in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were refugees at some point. They had to move from their hometown to go into a different town. Over 108 million people around the world are displaced forcefully. When you start to look into the numbers and you see, like in Syria, for example, over 6.5 million people left Syria because of what's happening. And they went where? To Iraq and the different neighboring countries, where countries which themselves are struggling with refugee issues. So you can see the world is today, at least, really needs the Imam alayhi salam to talk about the refugee issue and the crisis that's happening.
So Hussam, why do you think that the riser, Aba Al-Sadiq from him, made this post?
Why he would make such a post? This is something that's like, I think when I first read this thing and I read through it and I read it again, just so that it can sink in, it really hit home, because there are millions of people who are suffering around the world. And we do not find the world, for example, you know, the world leaders and the governments and the scholars of religion, we don't find them really addressing this problem directly like he did. And this is one of the evidence for him. He must be the Qa'im of Muhammad, the riser of the family of Muhammad, the Mahdi, right? Who comes and spreads justice in the world. How is he going to do that except that he talks about something which is so pressing, and it's a human crisis that's happening all the way around the world. As we said earlier, 108 million. You know, that's a lot of people being displaced forcefully from their homes. So then, who's going to talk for them? Who's going to talk for them and be their own voice, except the Qa'im of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam? And it's just as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was given victory by God. Our God is the God of the refugees and the migrants. Our God will grant victory to those who are oppressed around the world, the refugees and the migrants. This is why we have a studio and we're talking day and night about their cases. And this is why we have open field for everybody to send and upload their videos on our website. So if people are oppressed, you have a stage. The Imam alayhi salam, the Qa'im, the riser of Muhammad al-Muhammad has placed a stage open for you. Upload everything that you have. Show the world your oppression.
So that was Brother Hussam explaining one of the most incredible social media posts made by the riser of the family of Muhammad on the God of the refugees. We have right now with us Aryan Al-Mahdi. You're going to be going into a part of the Goal of the Wise for us.
Yes, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about, just briefly about something very important, and that is something that no previous times and covenants had ever truly established, nor had they ever really preached, and that is that this religion and this covenant is for every single body, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of background, race, or whatever category that the human race decided to divide themselves into over the past thousands of years since the time of Adam up until now. And, just before we get into it, I'm just going to be taking it off of this book, The Goal of the Wise, which is our book from the savior of mankind, from the riser of the family Muhammad, Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq, from him his peace, who we take from, who we learn from, and who we base our faith and belief off of totally without any exception from his words. So there is an interesting part in the book, and page number 112, I'll get into it right now, in which talks about the beauty of this covenant and what comes with it. Now, just give me a moment to flip through the page.
I think it's beautiful that we can actually talk about that, especially in light of the fact that everything we see that's wrong with this world right now has to do with segregation, has to do with dividing people up.
Yeah, whether it's, has to do with skin color or race or nationality or religion, the world is divided, and that's not something that God intended. We find in the Garden of Eden that God says, I created man in my image. So if we are creating the image of man, then why do we divide each other? Why is it that we put divisions and boundaries towards each other based off of language or race? But yeah, that's something beautiful in this covenant in which Abu Sadiq says about it. He says, there has never been another covenant that sought to unite all of the world religions in truth, such as the seventh covenant. Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family attempted to unite the people of the book under the banner of the submission to the one God, Islam. But the religions which he tried to unite were all Semitic and mainly Jewish-based religions. For the Holy Quran mentions the Jews, the Christians, and the Mandaeans for the most part, along with their books and prophets. But that's pretty much it. The seventh covenant is the only covenant that seeks to revive and unite every religion whose origin was a prophet, worldwide from Adam's time until today. It's a very beautiful line because that's something true. It's from the time that Adam came onto the earth, the covenant that was upon the people was really based off of his family. And what do I mean by family? I mean by his lineage from Abel or from Seth downward, and not from Cain. From Noah, it was the same thing. His whole family, with the exception of Canaan. When it came to Abraham, it was only his family now, from the line of Ismail and from the line of Isaac. When it came to Moses, it was just the children of Israel, his people, from the line of Jacob. When it came to Jesus, it would now push all the way to the Arabs, only the line of Ismail. When Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family came, he wanted to unite everybody, but in his lifetime, he could not do it. So the seventh covenant is an extension of that previous covenant that Muhammad came with. The final seventh everlasting covenant, which deals with not any bloodline or physical lineage or any of that sort, but rather anybody on the planet who wants to get close to God, anybody who wants to have a relationship with God, no matter from which language he comes from or which part of the world or which orientation that he follows, they can be a part of that journey with us and they can be a part of God's family.
That's incredible. And we see it happening right now in front of our eyes with the community that we have of believers that are a global community.
Yeah, and it's something beautiful. It's something that, like, for example, I come from America, from an Albanian ancestry. Arno comes from Switzerland, and you come from Pakistan, and yet we're sitting in the same place together. We practice the same thing, and we consider each other as family members.
We have these sentences that come often when we speak about our religion. We speak about humanity first. We say also often to anybody who is interested in this call that God never misguides his sincere servant. So again, it's coming back to what you said, is there is no discrimination, there is no prerequisites. If you are sincerely looking for God and for truth, you are welcome.
And that's what unites us all, the fact that we are made in God's image and we are of his children. And it's upon the siblings and the children of God to see that we are siblings, that we all come from the same source, and that we are actually one and not many. But until humanity can see that, the progression of the human race in terms of humanity first rather than me first and my brothers last, it should be me last and my brothers first.
Aryan, what should people out there do if they want to continue reading from where you stopped?
Obviously, they would have to, in terms of the physical book, they would have to go on our website on the ahmadireligion.org, and they can download it for free, whether it's in English or in Arabic, and I believe also in German. Also, we have it now, and other languages will be available. But also, it's not just only about downloading the book physically and reading it, but have that open heart and that open mind to truly understand the message that we're talking about, because this is the only book that really talks about the crisis that humanity is in right now and the solution to mankind's problems, which has divided us throughout this whole time.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Aryan.
It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. We will be going now to do something very interesting. Let's meditate with our dear brother, Abdullah Al-Mahdi.
Welcome to our meditation segment, As Within, So Without. Meditation is an important practice in our religion. As Imam Ali said, that 1 hour of contemplation is worth 1 year of worship. We believe too that we are co-creator of our reality, in the sense that the way we think, the way we act and speak is morphing and creating to a certain extent the reality that we are living in. We believe also that meditation is part of an hygiene of the believer in God, with eating correctly and exercising. We think that meditation is a tool for you to have a clear mind so you can be more aware of God. And we know that being God conscious is the foundation of any spiritual practice. Today, for our first segment, we will dive into one of the statements of Aba Al-Sadiq, Abdullah Hashem, peace is from him. So, in his post, he says, "There are two forces in constant struggle with one another. Both are trying to take control over the body and its actions. One is the good nafs and the other is the evil nafs. Both are mentioned in the Quran. O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you from one nafs and created from it its mate and dispersed from both of them many men and women. The nafs is the good nafs and its pair is the evil nafs. The good nafs in the Quran is called the tranquil self. Allah will say to the righteous, O tranquil self, return to your Lord, well pleased with him and well pleasing to him. The tranquil self is at peace with its Lord and is not in a struggle against God. The other self is the evil self, and in the Quran it is called the commander of evil. And I do not acquit myself, Indeed, the self is a persistent commander of evil, except those upon which my Lord has mercy. Indeed, my Lord is forgiving and merciful. You cannot eradicate one of the selves, or else you yourself will die. But you can cause the evil self to submit. That's what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, meant when he said, "My devil has become a Muslim." The shaitan is the evil self. Hence, Imam Ali, peace be upon him, said, "Every person is the devil of his own self." The way you can cause your evil self to submit or be defeated is by starving it and feeding the good self. Both selves feed off of the senses. Starve the bad self through not allowing your ears to hear evil forms of music and backbiting and bad words, and feed the good self through the ears by listening to the Quran and to good speech and to words of the proofs of Allah. Starve the bad self through depriving your tongue from speaking evil and consuming forbidden foods, and feed your good self through good speech and eating that which is permissible. And as such, with your eyes and your hands and all your being. I always like the parable of the two wolves. It is an old parable, erroneously attributed to the Native Americans, but it was actually a Christian parable, and its origin comes from one of the followers of Jesus, peace be upon him, who heard it from him. An old man is teaching his grandson about life. "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil, his anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other is good, his joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The same fight is going on inside you, and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute, and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old man simply replied, "The one you feed." But feeding the good self is only a part of it. The self is like a muscle. In order to grow your muscle, you must feed yourself protein and also apply pressure to it through working out. The good self must be fed while the evil self is starved, and then pressure must be applied in order that it grows. This requires going against what the self wants, putting others ahead of yourself, sacrificing that which is dear to you for the sake of God, etc. When God wanted to draw Abraham near, he applied pressure on him and asked him to slaughter that which he loved and held precious, his son. When God wanted to draw Moses' mother near, he applied pressure and inspired her to give up Moses by placing him in the basket in the Nile. The good self of Abraham and Jochebed had to go against itself and obey. Only then did it learn to trust God, and only then did it grow. They learned that a person never loses what he sacrifices for God. "Truly I tell you," Jesus replied, "no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in the present age, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first." When the good self is in control and the evil self has submitted, the soul of the person can shine through. The soul is the Lord of the self. There is more about this matter in my book, The Goal of the Wise. So we see here with this story how important it is to control, to master your own ego, to distinguish between these two voices in order for your light, for your soul to shine through. But prior to feed one or the other of these two voices, these two wolves, you will need to distinguish between one and the other. And don't think it's always so obvious, because as in the scriptures it is said that the devil can disguise as an angel of light, he can do the same inside of you, and his voice can be very sweet and very pleasant. So to learn all of that, you have to start to be familiar with silence too, because in silence, much more easy it will be to distinguish between these two different voices. And the more you practice, the more obvious and evident you will distinguish between these two voices. So what I propose here for a few minutes is that we can practice a very, very simple meditation that it can work for anybody. You don't need any prerequisites, some experience in it. We can just go along and you can follow me. So the first thing we can do is you can close your eyes. If you're comfortable with it, it's not obligatory, but it's often more effective if you do so. You can find a comfortable place where you can sit. You can also, right now, commit for 5-7 minutes maybe. You decide that for this time you will practice, you will do that, and you will not answer any call, you will not be distracted with anything else. And the first thing you will do is just be here and now. And everything that belongs to the past and that you will do later in your day, just forget about it for a few minutes. Also, any other places, any other context, you just forget about it. And you're just here, sitting where you are sitting. And right now you are here and you just open. Your attitude is, I'm opening, I'm listening, I'm observing, I'm like space. And you can pay attention right now to what is around you. Any noise that you can hear, close or far, anything. Just pay attention, open. You can also feel maybe the temperature of the air, if there is some wind, if you are outside. Anything that you can perceive, just pay attention to it freely. When you have done that, now you can pay attention to your own kingdom, to your own body, mind, and just have this curious, open, free look, and just notice what is there. And for this moment, we don't ask you to fix anything, to correct anything, just pay attention. How is your kingdom? How is it inside? Is it peaceful? Is it at war? Are you living in a confused state? Is it the dictatorship of the ego? Or is it the hegemony of the heart, or a divine just state where the heart is leading and the mind is clear? And don't judge yourself. Now just pay attention, just notice. Because if you try now to battle to what is disturbing you, if you feel some tension, if you feel some tiredness, if you feel some energy that is not pleasing, do not interact with it. Your task right now is to be like space, like the sky. Don't interact with the clouds. Just let them appear, and by this attitude of yours, they will disappear by themselves. Another image we can take is a glass of mud or sand. You see, if you try to take out the sand and the mud when it is all mixed with the water, it will never work. You have right now to just sit and accept to be silent for a while. Just be quiet and let the sand, let the mud fall. Your attitude is, I'm opening, I'm listening, I'm observing, I'm like space. and what it will be needed to take out, to be fixed, to be corrected, then it will be much more easy to distinguish it and then to take it out, to fix it. This is a practice that you can do every day, and the more you practice, 5-7 minutes maybe a day, you can repeat it also during the day. The more you practice, the more you will see results. And if the first time you don't see results, just trust the process. Because really it's not something outside of religion or outside of action. It is really like an hygiene. And the more you practice, you will be also more clear in your action, more clear in your speech, and more aware of the message of God through synchronicity around you during the day. You will be more available also for your peers, your people around you. And it will be more easy for you to align with this will of God, not so concerned and busy with your own process, your own little worry of your own little I. I hope this was beneficial for you as a first session. I wish you the best, and peace be upon you all.
So that was an absolutely beautiful meditation session. Thank you so much, dear brother Abno. We appreciate that so much. That was an incredible show. We've gone over quite a few topics today. Let's leave the viewers on another note of inspiration, something from the Holy Bible. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will catch you again next week. And until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me.
Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.